My daughter humiliated me for being poor and rejected me at her wedding, but when her drunk mother destroyed the entire event, she called me crying and begging me to save her. And my answer left everyone speechless. I'm 51 years old. I've been driving a cargo truck for almost 30 years, and 3 months ago I made the hardest decision of my life. I refused to go to my daughter's wedding. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. Everyone thinks that fathers who don't go to their kids' weddings are monsters or something, but I need to tell this story because I've been carrying this inside for months, and honestly, I don't know if I did the right thing or not. I just know I couldn't keep allowing myself to be treated like garbage. I guess I should start from the beginning. I met Barbara when we were 22. We both came from families that didn't have much, those families where you work hard just to stay afloat. We got married a year after we started dating because that's how things were done back then, or at least in our circle. Barbara worked at a clothing store, and I had just gotten my trucker's license. We didn't have much, but we were happy, or so I thought. We rented a small apartment, one of those with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors arguing at 3 in the morning, and we started building something together. When Nicole was born, everything changed, like it always does, I guess. Barbara stopped working to stay home with the baby, and I started doing longer shifts to compensate. I was working like 14 hours a day, sometimes more, because I wanted my daughter to have more than I had as a kid. I wanted her to have new toys, not hand-me-downs. I wanted to take her to McDonald's on weekends, stuff like that. They weren't big luxuries, but for us, they meant a lot. Barbara complained that I was never home, that she felt lonely all day with the baby. And I understood, honestly. But what else could I do? Someone had to pay the bills. The first years were hard but good, you know what I mean? Nicole was a beautiful girl, with her mother's curly hair and my gray eyes. I loved coming home after a long trip and having her run to the door screaming, "Daddy, Daddy." Those moments made all the tiredness worth it, all the nights sleeping in the truck, all the gas station food that was killing my stomach. Barbara and I had our problems, like all couples, but I thought we were fine, that we were a normal family trying to get by. Then Nicole turned 7, and everything went to hell. Barbara got a part-time job at a fancy cafe, one of those that charge $6 for a latte and have French names for everything. She said she needed to get out of the house, meet people, feel useful again. I thought it was fine, honestly. I figured it would be good for her to have something to do, besides taking care of Nicole, who was in school anyway. What I didn't know is that at that cafe she met Edward. Edward was like 43 at the time, I think. He was a guy with a lot of money who went to the cafe every day to work on his laptop. This was like 17 years ago, when having a laptop was still kind of a luxury thing. He had a Mercedes, wore expensive suits, and, from what I found out later, he left Barbara $50 tips every time she served him. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. Barbara started dressing up more for work, bought new clothes with money she supposedly was saving, came home late saying she had to stay cleaning. But I trusted her. I mean, we'd been together almost 9 years. We had a daughter. Why would I suspect? The night everything exploded was a Friday. I had come home early from a trip because the client canceled the delivery until Monday, so I got home around 8 at night instead of midnight like usual. Nicole was at my mom's house, where we left her when I traveled and Barbara worked. I got home and Barbara wasn't there. I waited an hour, 2 hours, called her like 20 times, and nothing. Finally, she showed up at 11 at night, completely drunk. And when I say drunk, I mean she could barely walk straight. She sat on the couch and just laid it all out on me. Just like that, she told me she'd been having an affair with Edward for 6 months, that she was in love with him, that she wanted a divorce. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I asked her about Nicole and, you know what she said? She said that Edward didn't want to raise another man's daughter, that it was better if Nicole stayed with me. Just like that, like she was talking about a piece of furniture that wouldn't fit in her new apartment. She didn't cry, didn't really apologize, just said she needed to live a little, that she'd gotten married too young, that she deserved something better than a middle-class life. I remember just sitting there thinking, is this really happening? Is the woman I slept next to every night for 9 years, the mother of my daughter, really telling me this? The next day, the divorce process started. Barbara didn't even fight for custody of Nicole. She literally signed all the papers giving me full custody without thinking twice. My lawyer, who he got with a loan that took me years to pay off, told me it was extremely rare for a mother not to fight for at least shared custody. But Barbara just wanted her freedom and half of our almost non-existent assets. Edward had promised he would support her, that she would live like a queen, all that. And so began the next 17 years of my life. I raised Nicole completely alone. My mom helped when she could, but she also worked, so most of the time it was Nicole and me against the world. I had to change my trucking routes to be home every night. That meant earning almost half of what I was earning before. But there was no choice. I wasn't going to leave my 7-year-old daughter alone. I learned to do her braids terribly, by the way. They always came out crooked. To cook something more than hamburgers. To help her with homework, even though I didn't understand anything about 5th grade math. Nicole was an amazing kid, honestly. She never complained that we didn't have much. Money never made me feel bad about not being able to buy her the expensive things her friends had. We went to the park on Sundays, watched movies on TV, made homemade pizza on Fridays. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I thought we were happy. Barbara showed up every 2 or 3 months with expensive gifts for Nicole, $200 toys, brand name clothes, all bought with Edward's money, obviously. Nicole got excited, like any kid would, but after Barbara left, she always came to me for a hug and told me she preferred me. But Barbara never married Edward. That's the detail that makes everything even sadder. Edward turned out to be a guy who didn't believe in marriage, supposedly for philosophical reasons, but the truth is, he was a compulsive womanizer. I found out because my sister worked at a bank and once saw Edward making out with a woman at a restaurant, and it definitely wasn't Barbara. But Barbara stayed with him anyway, living in his fancy house, spending his money, drinking more and more, because I guess that was the only way she could deal with the life she had chosen. The real problem started when Nicole turned 18. Suddenly, she started spending more time with her mom, going to Edward's house on weekends. She'd come back talking about how big the house was, the pool, the trips Edward promised to pay for her. I watched as my daughter, the girl I raised alone for 11 years, started getting dazzled by all that money and that lifestyle. I tried to talk to her, tell her that money wasn't the most important thing, but at 18 no one wants to hear that, right? She told me I didn't understand, that she deserved to have nice things, that she'd lived her whole life without luxuries because of me. Because of me. Those words hurt more than I can explain. I had worked like a dog for 17 years, had given up promotions because they meant more travel, had worn the same clothes for years so she could have new shoes when she needed them, and it was all my fault because I wasn't rich like Edward. Nicole started studying hairdressing at a school that Barbara paid for, with Edward's money, of course. She graduated and got a job at an expensive salon downtown, one of those where a haircut costs $150. She started earning well and living that lifestyle she liked so much, going out to fancy bars, buying brand-name clothes, traveling when she could. Our relationship cooled over the years. By the time she was 23, Nicole barely visited me, maybe once a month, and it was always because she needed something. Like, could I lend her money? Could I fix her car? Could I store some boxes in my garage? I always said yes because she was still my daughter and I loved her, but it hurt to see what she had become. She was no longer that sweet girl who hugged me when I got home from work. Now she was a woman who valued money and status more than genuine relationships. About 8 months ago, Nicole called me super excited to tell me she had gotten engaged. Her boyfriend was a guy named Benjamin. He came from a family with a lot of money. I mean, like old money family. Those that have had the same middle name for 5 generations. I was happy for her. Honestly, I thought maybe this would make her mature, settle down. She invited me to dinner to meet Benjamin, and I went with the best attitude possible. Benjamin was polite, I guess, although you could tell he came from a completely different world than mine. He talked about his trips to Europe, his MBA, his family's company. I felt like a stranger at that dinner, but I tried to be nice and show interest. The weeks passed, and Nicole started with the wedding plans. She told me everything excitedly. The venue they had chosen, a super expensive hall that cost like $30,000 just to rent. The menu food I'd never heard of. The photographer, $5,000. The dress, $8,000 from some European. I just nodded and tried to seem excited, although inside I was thinking how was it possible that a wedding cost more than what I earned in a year? But, well, it wasn't my money. Benjamin's parents were paying for almost everything, and Barbara had put in something too, so I didn't say anything. One day, like 3 months before the wedding, Nicole came to visit me. We were having coffee in my kitchen. That kitchen where I had taught her to make pancakes when she was 9, where we had spent so many Sunday mornings together. She told me she had to talk to me about something important related to the wedding. I thought she was going to ask me for money or something. I had already mentally prepared myself to say I could contribute a couple $1,000s even if it left my account at zero. But no. What she told me was worse. Nicole explained that she and Benjamin had decided there wouldn't be the tradition of the father walking the bride down the aisle. She told me it was a patriarchal and outdated tradition, that it basically symbolized the father handing over the daughter as if she were property, and that they wanted to have a more modern and egalitarian ceremony. I sat there processing her words. Part of me understood what she was saying, I guess. But another part, the part that had dreamed of that moment for 24 years, felt devastated. I told her it was okay, that I respected her decision, that it was her wedding after all. She seemed relieved and left shortly after. A couple of weeks passed, and I kept thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how for 17 years I had been enough to raise her, to support her, to be there when she needed me, but I wasn't enough to walk with her at her wedding. I tried to convince myself it was her decision and I should respect it, but it hurt. It hurt so much, if I'm honest. Then, one day I had to stop by the salon where Nicole worked to drop off some car insurance papers she needed to. Sign the car was still in my name, because that way her insurance was cheaper. I got there early and she was with a client, so I sat down to wait for her at the reception. The receptionist, a young girl who knew Nicole, was talking on the phone with someone about plans for after work. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard her mention Nicole's wedding. She said something like, "Yeah, it's going to be beautiful," and Nicole says it's going to be super emotional when Edward walks her down the aisle. He's so proud. My heart sank. Edward. Nicole was going to let Edward, the guy who destroyed our family, the guy who convinced her mother to abandon her, walk her down the aisle. That whole story about the patriarchal tradition was a lie. She just didn't want me to do it. The receptionist realized I had heard, turned completely red, and hung up the phone quickly. I sat there not knowing what to do, feeling like someone had hit me in the stomach with a hammer. Nicole came out like 2 minutes later, and saw my face. I think she knew immediately that I knew. I asked her directly if it was true, if Edward was going to walk her down the aisle. She immediately got defensive, told me we could talk about that later, that it wasn't the time or place, but I wasn't going to let her escape. I told her I wanted the truth right now. We moved to the back room of the salon, which smelled of hair dye chemicals and hairspray, and there she confessed everything. She told me yes, that Edward was going to walk her down the aisle, that Benjamin's parents came from a world where those traditions were important and that she couldn't show up walking alone because it would look weird. That Barbara had insisted that Edward do it because he had been like a father to her all these years that I actually was her father, but whatever. I asked her why she hadn't told me from the beginning, and you know what she said? She said she knew I was going to make a drama like the one I was making at that moment, but it didn't end there. I told her I was hurt, that it seemed unfair that she would choose Edward over me after everything we'd been through together. And then Nicole let out what she really thought. She told me, literally, that I was a middle-class piece of junk, that Benjamin's family came from money and education, that I, with my calloused hands and my 15-year-old pickup truck, wasn't going to fit in at her elegant wedding, that Edward at least knew how to behave in those environments because he had class and sophistication, middle-class piece of junk. My own daughter, the girl whose diapers I had changed, who I had consoled when she fell off her bike, who I had paid for every meal for 18 years, called me a piece of junk. I stood there looking at her and didn't recognize her. This wasn't my Nicole. This was a stranger who valued appearance and status more than real love. I asked her if that was all I had meant to her all these years. She crossed her arms and told me I had never understood how hard it was for her to grow up poor, that all her friends had things she couldn't have, that now she finally had the chance to have the life she always wanted, and I wasn't going to ruin it. I left that salon feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I drove home without remembering how I got there, honestly. I sat in my living room, that living room where we had watched 1,000 movies together, where we had put together her 6th grade science project at 2 in the morning because she had forgotten about it, and I cried. I cried like I hadn't since Barbara left. My whole life had been for that girl, and it had meant nothing to her, absolutely nothing. That night, I made a decision. I sent Nicole a text message telling her I wasn't going to go to her wedding, that after what she had said to me, after how she had treated me, I couldn't be there watching another man walk her down the aisle while I sat in a corner like just another guest. That I wished her the best, but I needed to respect myself, and attending that wedding under those circumstances would be betraying myself. I blocked her on my phone, on my social media, everywhere. For the first time in 24 years, I put my needs before hers. The following weeks were horrible. My mom called me every day, asking me to reconsider, telling me Nicole was my only daughter, that I was going to regret it, that families have to forgive. But I couldn't. I simply couldn't swallow that level of disrespect. Barbara also tried to contact me through my sister, saying I was being selfish and dramatic. The irony of Barbara calling me selfish after everything she had done wasn't lost on me. The wedding day arrived. I stayed home, had a couple of beers, watched the football game that was on. I tried not to think about what was happening an hour away, how Nicole would look in her $8,000 dress, how Edward would be enjoying a role that should have been mine, but it was impossible not to think about it, obviously. Around 6 in the evening, my sister called me from an unknown number. He had blocked hers, too. I answered without thinking, and she was hysterical, telling me I had to go to the venue immediately, that something terrible had happened. I got scared thinking there had been an accident or something. I asked her what had happened. Between tears of laughter, yes, laughter, she told me what had happened. Turns out Barbara had arrived at the wedding completely drunk, like 3 glasses of wine before the ceremony even started, level of drunkenness where you can't walk without stumbling. During the cocktail hour before dinner, Barbara had started openly and shamelessly flirting with Benjamin's father, in front of his wife, in front of all the guests. She touched his arm, laughed really loud at his jokes, at one point even told him he was much more attractive than Edward. But it got worse. Edward, who was there with his bruised ego, confronted Barbara in front of everyone. They started yelling at each other in the middle of the event hall, with all the guests watching. Barbara, in her state of inebriation, started airing all the dirty laundry. She yelled at him that she'd spent 17 years with him, putting up with his infidelities, that she knew about the other 3 women he had, that he had never married her because he never really loved her, that he only kept her as a trophy pet. Edward yelled back that she was a pathetic drunk who had abandoned her daughter for money, and that she wasn't even pretty enough to justify all the money he spent on her. Benjamin's parents and other guests started leaving scandalized. Nicole was crying hysterically. Benjamin was pale, trying to calm his parents who were already asking for their car from the valet. The whole event that had cost tens of thousands of dollars turned into the cheapest circus, with Barbara and Edward yelling at each other drunk while the important guests fled the scene. My sister was telling me all this between laughs because, well, after so many years of watching Barbara and Edward act like they were better than everyone, seeing them fall apart publicly had its poetic justice. I hung up the phone and sat there, not knowing how to feel. Part of me felt bad for Nicole, because no one deserves to have their wedding ruined like that. But another part, a part I'm not very proud of, felt a kind of dark satisfaction. Nicole had chosen that world, had chosen money and status over genuine love, and that world had shown her its true face at the worst possible moment. About 2 hours later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and it was Nicole, crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. She was calling me from a friend's phone because she had me blocked. She was begging me to come to the venue, to forgive her, to help her fix things with Benjamin's parents who had left furious, that she needed me. She told me she was so sorry, that she had made a mistake, that I had always been there for her, and she needed me to be there now. I asked her where Barbara was, where Edward was. She told me Edward had left driving drunk, that Barbara was lying in the bathroom of the venue vomiting, that Benjamin was trying to talk to his parents on the phone, and everything was a disaster. Then I asked her what I needed to ask her, since this whole nightmare started. I asked her, "Do you still think I'm a middle-class piece of junk?" There was silence on the line. I asked her, "Are you still ashamed of me?" More silence. I told her, "Nicole, all these weeks you had a chance to apologize, to acknowledge that you treated me horribly, but you never did. You're calling me now because you need me, because your perfect world fell apart, not because you really care how I feel." She started saying that she did care, that she had always loved me, but I interrupted her. I told her that for 24 years, I had given up everything for her, that I had sacrificed my career, my social life, my possibility of having a new partner, everything to give her the best life I could give her. That when her mother abandoned her, I was there. When she had her first heartbreak, I was there. When she failed her driving test twice, I was there to console her and take her again. But when it came time for her wedding, when it came time when I could have had that special father-daughter moment, she chose the man who destroyed our family because he had more money and better shoes. I told her no, that I wasn't going to go rescue her, that she had chosen her family and would have to live with the consequences of that decision, that I deserved something better than being her second choice, her backup plan when things went wrong, that I hoped she had a good life with Benjamin and with the world she valued so much, but that I was no longer going to be part of that. I hung up the phone and turned it off. 2 days later, I got a long email from Nicole. He couldn't block her email because I didn't realize until later. It was a weird mix of apology and accusation. She apologized for what she had said to me, said she was stressed and didn't mean it. But she also blamed me for not going to save her wedding, said a real father would have been there no matter what, that I had chosen my pride over her. She said that now Benjamin's parents thought her family was a circus, and that Benjamin was reconsidering everything because of the embarrassment he had gone through. And it was all my fault for not being there to fix it. I didn't respond. To this day, 3 months later, I haven't responded. I deleted the email and moved on with my life. And you know what? For the first time in 24 years, I'm putting myself first. I joined a motorcycle club, nothing crazy. It's just guys my age who get together on Sundays to do routes. I started going out more with my coworkers. I became friends with my neighbor who's also divorced and has 2 kids who don't talk to him anymore. Last week, my friends from the club made me a profile on a dating app. They made fun of me all afternoon while we chose photos. "You don't have many. Turns out when you spend 24 years raising a daughter alone, there's no time for selfies." We put that I'm a truck driver, that I like football and action movies, that I have an adult daughter I'm not currently in contact with. A woman named Casey sent me a message. She's 48, divorced, works as an administrator at a hospital. We've been chatting all week and we agreed to meet for coffee next Saturday. I don't know if I did the right thing with Nicole. My mom doesn't talk to me anymore. She says I'm cruel and that I'm going to die alone and regretful. My sister understands but thinks I should eventually forgive Nicole. My friends at work are divided. Some say a father always has to be there. Others say, no one has the right to treat you like garbage, not even your daughter. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like a doormat. I don't feel invisible. I feel like someone who has a right to be respected, to be valued for what I did and not looked down on for what I don't have. Maybe someday Nicole will understand what I did, why I did it. Maybe not. Maybe she'll stay with Benjamin and have a wonderful life full of expensive things and social events where everyone uses words I don't understand. Or maybe she'll realize that money can't buy you everything, that there are things worth more than a Mercedes and a house with a pool. I don't know, honestly. What I do know is that my first date with Casey is in 4 days, and my friends are already planning what clothes I should wear, and that, for now, is enough.